Actually, it's 5 after, so we'll get started. And just trying to bring up the right screen. Sorry again, folks, about the background sound that's gonna come and go at times. We have another meeting going on, and so just trying to get the right screen up so I can see how to maybe do whether I want to do a roundtable or not. Oh yeah, it's not too many people. So I tell you what. So we're gonna get started, and welcome to our monthly RTAC meeting, and I'm happy to see everyone here. And we'll just do a quick round of intros, and I'll call your name, and you just say who you are and your affiliation, and anything else that you briefly want to mention. So we'll start with Christina.
Sorry,
Hello, I'm Christina Fregoso with Boston Society of Civil Engineers.
Hold on a second, Matt. You want to say something?
Sorry, I did want to jump in quickly. So contrary to the instructions on the screen for people who joined a little bit late, you do have the ability to unmute yourself. I would ask that during the question and answer segment, you do use the raise hand function to indicate that you have a question so that you can be called on. But for right now, you can freely unmute yourself. So just wanted to jump in and say that.
Right. And Matt, is there any introductory stuff that you want to go through for legal or formal purposes?
I can give a quick run through of the meeting guidelines, but that is it.
Okay, sure. Then why don't we do that? I jumped the gun a little bit, so thanks.
Oh, no worries. Just everybody who enters the meeting, enters the meeting will come in muted. We do ask that if you're on the computer, if you could rename yourself to include your first and last name. You can disregard item 3. And to participate in the discussion, please use the raise hand function. You can find this by clicking on the participants button. That's at the bottom of your screen, and a window will pop up, and there is a raise hand button on that. You will then be called on by the chair, but you will be able to mute and unmute yourself. If you are calling into this meeting, you can raise your hand by dialing *9, and you can unmute and mute yourself by dialing *6. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Matt Archer, that's me, via the chat box, emailing me at marcher@ctps.org, or by calling 857-702-3708. And that is me being done.
That's all right, Matt. Thank you very much. And this is me continuing with the introductions. And we'll go to John McQueen.
John McQueen, Walk Boston.
And Chris Porter.
Sorry, I had to find the unmute button. Chris Porter, Massachusetts Bicycle Coalition.
Thank you. Barbara Rutman. Maybe Barbara's just hanging out with us.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
It's Barbara Rutman from CTPS, and I am the administrative assistant.
Thanks,
and I'm
Bob.
taking the minutes on the meeting.
Oh, great. Thank you, Barbara. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Steve Raldi.
Yes, hi, Steve Rotting, Mass DOT Aeronautics Division.
Oh, great. Thanks for joining us. And John Seward.
John Seward, Muth, Mass.
Thank you, John. And Franny Osmond.
Franny?
Yes. Oh, introductions.
Yeah.
Franny Osmond. I had to go deal with my father for a second.
No problem.
Franny Osmond from town of Acton.
Thanks, Franny. David Montgomery.
David Montgomery, town of Needham.
Thanks, David. Michelle Scott.
Michelle Scott, Boston Region MPO staff.
Okay, and we have someone on the phone. Last 2 digits are 95. Matt, how did they?
As a quick reminder, you can dial *6 to unmute yourself. But if there is an issue, I will ask to unmute, and perhaps this will work.
I think.
Hi, Barry Steinberg, Association for Public Transportation.
Hi, Barry. Long time no hear. Good to have you. And let me just scroll through here, and it looks like it. I mean, yeah. And so we'll now transition to our guest. I mean, I'll save her the double introduction by just saying that we're now about to talk with Anne McGann about our major topic today, which is on the major introduction, the definition, and how we handle major introduction as part of the LRTP policy. This all came about because we had some projects that were initially complete streets, and the trigger or the threshold for a project being defined as a major infrastructure project was $20 million. That's correct, Fran? I mean, correct, Ann?
Yep.
Right, and so we have projects that were, put into the tip, or LTP at, let's say, 18 million, and then by the time we got ready to schedule it, it had gone over the 20 million threshold, and then became a major infrastructure project. And since the MPO has some goals with respect to what amounts of money we devote to various projects, the types of projects, when a project would go over that threshold and then become a major infrastructure project, well, that would throw off how it looked, how it was perceived, or how we were recording the extent to which we were meeting our goals, and could actually make an major infrastructure project or make it seem like we have a major infrastructure project when we don't. So we're trying to deal with that, and so that's how we came about dealing with this issue. As you know, we wanted to have Ann here to talk with us about this. Anyways, in the last MPO meeting, as we were discussing the policy implications of our new definition, it became apparent that this issue was a little more complex, at least for me. And so although I am very much inclined to go with the staff's recommendations, and you'll see those later because they make sense to me. I didn't want to just go along when I still had some questions that were kind of raised in the process of the last meeting. And so I really wanted to get some feedback from my colleagues here on the advisory council, and the other members of the MPO were very respectful and cordial and willing to give us the time to meet and discuss this some more. So here's a chance for us to give some more input. I know this material is going to be a bit dense, and so you may not feel ready to say a lot at the end of this meeting, but we have until the following, not tomorrow, but Thursday after that, to weigh in at the board meeting. And so you'll have more time to get back to me with your feelings about things. If you have more questions, you can ask me. I'll try to answer them, but you can always ask staff. I can't emphasize how much they are accommodating to our questions. And you certainly don't have to go through me to ask those questions. So there's a long introduction to Anne McGann, but with that, I'd now turn it over to her.
Thanks, Len. And I believe this is going to be on the October 1st meeting. It won't be at the next meeting, but it'll be October 1st. So you have that much more time.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Again, I'm Anne McGann. I am the project manager for the Long Range Transportation Plan at the Boston MPO. And Len asked me to come talk to you today about the Major Infrastructure Investment Program, which the MPO has been talking about. And we've actually been talking about this over the last year. Okay, oh, it's working great. So there are three major issues surrounding the Major Infrastructure Program topic, which is one of the investment programs that is included in the Long Range Transportation Plan, or what we call the LRTP. First, the MPO discussed and adopted a new definition for the major infrastructure program. So I'm going to go through that piece of the presentation first, and then I'll take a break before we get into these next two issues, because it's going to be, as Len said, very dense and a little bit long. So second, then we are now discussing the types of projects that need to be listed in the LRTP. And then finally, the MPO is discussing the scoring and programming of major infrastructure projects in the LRTP. So staff put together a memorandum to help the MPO through these discussions, and it gives a history of the major infrastructure program and the issues that are being discussed regarding this program. So the memo summarizes the items that were discussed in the MPO meetings over the last year, provides a history of the major infrastructure program, provides information on the federal requirements behind past major infrastructure program definitions, and then it provides staff recommendations on the definition of the major infrastructure program and project scoring and programming of these projects. So this memorandum was posted for your meeting, and I'm going to go over that information and the information that was presented to the MPO, and then we can talk about where the MPO is in its decision-making process. So I want to start by refamiliarizing you with the MPO's 6 investment programs that were established as part of the current LRTP Destination 2040, which was adopted last year. The memo includes a description of the 6 programs along with the MPO's funding goals for each program. And Len talked a little bit about this. The funding goals for each program were established by the MPO to signal to the public the types of projects the MPO would like to fund as part of its LRTP and Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. And a summary of the programs is shown in Table 1 of that memorandum. So the 6 programs are shown here on the slide. The Complete Streets program with a funding goal of 45% of our regional target funds. Intersection improvements with 13% funding goal. Okay. A little bit slow. Bicycle network and pedestrian connections with a 5% funding goal. Community connections with a 2% funding goal. Transit modernization with a 5% funding goal. And then the major infrastructure program with a funding goal of no more than 30% of the MPO's target funds. And again, the details are shown in Table 1 of the memo on these programs. So to focus now on the major infrastructure program, this slide shows the MPO's definition of its major infrastructure program that the MPO wanted to revisit. The MPO identified major infrastructure projects based on costs or whether they changed the capacity of the transportation network. The definition was any project that changes the capacity of the network that costs over $20 million. And it is also the policy of the MPO to list all major infrastructure projects in the long-range plan. So there was discussion which started during the development of Destination 2040 as to whether the MPO should revisit this definition, mostly because some felt that the cost threshold was too low, as Len pointed out. The discussion continued over the past year, and other issues, including project capacity changes, were also questioned. So this slide shows some of the key points made by MPO members from previous discussions. There should be some cost threshold to retain a level of scrutiny for projects that are expensive, with some members supporting a cost threshold of $50 million. The major infrastructure definition should capture projects that have a regional impact, such as an interchange improvement or significant transit extension. And there should be some way of accounting for projects that do not change the capacity, but do have an impact on a wide range of the public. The MPO could identify these projects by the project roadway type or vehicle miles of travel on that roadway. So I'm going to start by giving you a history of why capacity changes to the network was part of the definition. The MPO chose to identify major infrastructure projects as those projects that change the capacity of the transportation network that can be included in the travel demand model. And this was based on federal requirements related to the air quality conformity determination regulation for the long-range plan. So because of the MPO's air quality designation as non-attainment for certain pollutants, the MPO was required to perform conformity determinations and include all regionally significant projects as part of that analysis in the LRTP. So Federal Highway defined a regionally significant project as a transportation project that is on a facility that serves regional transportation needs, such as access to and from the area outside of the MPO region, access to major activity centers in the region, to major planned developments such as new retail malls and sport complexes, and to transportation terminals. These projects would be included in the modeling of an MPO's transportation network, including at a minimum all principal arterial highways and all fixed guideway transit facilities that offer an alternative to regional highway travel. So therefore, the MPO's definition included all projects that change the capacity of the network, such as adding or reducing travel lanes, as well as all new fixed guideway transit service. And as I said, these projects were all listed in the LRTP. So for cost thresholds, FHWA issued guidance which included cost thresholds for projects that were required to be listed in past long-range plans. This guidance varied over time. In 2008, for Journey to 2030, all projects over 10 million were required to be included in the plan. In 2016, for Charting Progress to 2040, all projects over 20 million were required to be included. However, for our most recent plan, Destination 2040, there were no cost threshold requirements. So with this history in mind, there are several themes that the MPO considered for its major infrastructure program definition. First, although not required by federal guidance, cost thresholds may provide a way for the MPO to identify projects that merit further scrutiny. Second, the transportation projects may not need to add or remove capacity to have regional impacts, depending on the project location and other characteristics. And conversely, a project may add or remove capacity, but not in ways that have regional impacts. And then last, major infrastructure definitions for projects that focus on federal requirements for projects that must be included in the LRTP may not meet the needs of the MPO as it decides how to allocate its limited funds across transportation projects and programs. So staff looked back through the historic definitions and guidance and MPO discussions to determine other factors that the MPO could consider in addition to capacity and cost in defining major infrastructure projects. They include roadway functional classification, environmental assessment or environmental impact statement requirements for projects to be listed in the LRTP, projects requiring specific levels of federal or state approval or oversight requirements for projects to be listed in the LRTP, projects that cross MPO boundaries, projects that will be funded wholly or in part through specific federal discretionary grant programs, projects that serve specific destinations within the region, and other project characteristics such as whether a project includes an interchange. So MPO staff considered these items and in the case of roadways concluded that functional classification of roadways was the best characteristic to determine if a project is affecting regional travel. So this slide shows FHWA's functional classification of roadways. Interstate highways are the highest classification of arterials and are designed and constructed with mobility and long distance travel in mind. Access to these roadways is through entrance and exit ramps. Principal arterial freeways or expressways include express highways built to interstate standards that are not designated as part of the interstate system, and access to these roadways is also provided through entrance and exit ramps. Principal arterials other classification serve major centers of metropolitan areas and provide a high degree of mobility with abutting land uses served directly. And access for these roadways include driveways to specific parcels and at-grade intersections with other roadways. However, there are some of these roadways that do have fully or partially controlled access, which includes entrance and exit ramps or side roads that intersect the road at grade instead of ramps. So the lower level classes of roadways include minor arterials, which provide service for trips of moderate length, serve geographic areas that are smaller than their higher arterial counterparts, and offer connectivity to the higher arterial system. They interconnect and augment the higher arterial system, provide intra-community continuity, and may carry local bus routes. Collector roadways serve a critical role in the roadway network by gathering traffic from local roads and funneling them to the arterial network. And local roads account for the largest percentage of all roadways in terms of mileage, but are not intended for use in long distance travel. Bus routes generally do not run on local roads and are often designed to discourage through traffic. So with the functional classification definitions in mind, staff offered the MPO the recommendations for the major infrastructure program. So when developing recommendations, staff goal was to suggest clear definitions that would help define the major infrastructure investment program in relation to other investment programs, and to develop an approach that addresses both federal and state requirements and supports scrutiny of projects with higher costs and or the potential for regional impacts. These would ideally simplify the MPO's classification and consideration of projects when making funding decisions, and would provide more clarity for project proponents on how their projects will be evaluated. Staff also considered how these definitions might affect administrative work resulting from amendments to both the LRTP and TIP documents when project costs change. And it was also noted that the board always has the discretion to include a project in this program if it chooses to do so. All classification of major infrastructure projects would be done when the project is submitted to the MPO for consideration, and this would allow MPO members and the project proponent to know at the beginning if it meets the requirements of the major infrastructure program. So with that in mind, staff recommended that major infrastructure projects should be defined separately from projects that are considered regionally significant for air quality and travel demand modeling purposes, or projects that must be listed in the LRTP to meet federal or state requirements. These definitions may have overlapping elements, but the MPO can structure its major infrastructure definition in ways that will best help to identify projects with regional impacts or merit increased scrutiny, allocate its dollars across investment programs, and focus on the types of projects it would like to prioritize for funding. The cost threshold amount for a project to be designated as major infrastructure would increase from 20 million to 50 million to allow the MPO to maintain a level of scrutiny for higher cost projects while creating a more distinct separation between the major infrastructure program and other investment programs, and potentially reducing the need for LRTP amendments. Even if a project does not meet the $50 million cost threshold, it would be classified as a major infrastructure project if it makes capital improvements to roadways that are classified as interstate highways, principal arterial freeways and expressways, or principal arterial other that have fully or partially controlled access. The MPO staff suggested specifying these roadways to focus the major infrastructure program on facilities that are important to regional travel. These roadways not only carry higher volumes of traffic, but they are also designed to move people from one part of the region to another, as opposed to within municipalities or small groups of municipalities. And also by focusing on the facility classification, the definition can accommodate a variety of project types. So even if a project does not meet the $50 million cost threshold, a transit project would be classified as a major infrastructure project if it creates new connections or extends the MPO's rail or fixed guideway rail and transit network. And again, a project can be added to the major infrastructure program at the MPO's discretion. So the MPO adopted the new definition at its August 20th MPO meeting, as shown here on the slide. So for major infrastructure projects on the roadway network, include those that meet at least one of the following criteria. Capital projects that improve facilities that are important to regional travel, which include interstate highways, principal arterial freeways and expressways, and all sections of roadways classified as principal arterial other that have fully or partially controlled access, and then projects that cost $50 million or more. So major infrastructure projects on the transit network include those that meet at least one of the following criteria. Capital projects that add new connections to or extend the rail or fixed guideway transit network, and projects that cost $50 million or more. Right. So for the transit network, the MPO is using the Fast Acts definition of no, went too far. A little slow today. So we're using, as I said, the Fast Act definition of fixed guideway, which include projects using and occupying a separate right-of-way for the exclusive use of public transportation, using rail, using a fixed catenary system, for a passenger ferry system, or for a bus rapid transit system. And fixed guideway can include heavy rail, light rail, commuter rail, streetcars, trolley bus, fixed guideway bus rapid transit, and ferries. This definition eliminates bus service operating on high occupancy vehicle lanes or high occupancy toll lanes from qualifying as fixed guideway service. And it does not allow the corridor-based bus rapid transit projects without a separated right-of-way dedicated for public transportation along the majority of the route. So this would not include dedicated bus lanes in our region. So for the roadway network, the next two slides show the interstate highways, principal arterial freeways and expressways, okay? And all sections of the principal arterial other that have fully or partially controlled access that would be included in the major infrastructure program. The maps, okay. The maps are also included in the memo. So this first map shows the full region. And then this second map zooms into the inner core region. Let's see. Okay. So to further illustrate how projects would be sorry guys, we're got a little slow motion here. There, I'm not going to touch it again. To further illustrate how projects would be categorized using this new definition, the memo includes a list of projects that are included in the Destination 2040 LRTP and the 21 to 25 TIP, along with the selected list of projects included in the universe of projects from both documents. So tables 2 through 6 in the memo include the projects by roadway classification, investment category, cost, and the status in the LRTP and TIP. This information was used in the discussions to determine the types of project that should be considered as part of the major infrastructure program. So table 2 shows the projects in the LRTP and TIP that are on interstate highways. Table 3 are projects on principal arterial freeways and expressways. Table 4 shows the projects on principal arterial highways classified as other. And as noted in this table, a number of the projects on the roadways in this category are fully or partially access controlled roadways. Table 5 shows projects on minor arterials, and table 6 are projects on collectors and local roadways. Yes.
And is the delay really bad today?
Well, it's not like right now I can't get it to advance. It's delayed, so then I like hit it again and then it goes too far. There's the next one. Okay. There are some impacts on the MPO's funding goals with the major infrastructure program definition changing. Oh, now we went too far. Sorry.
And would it be easier if I took over the slides if there's a huge delay?
I'm almost to the end, I think, of this section. So let's just keep going and we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
All right, unless you want to, now I'm on the wrong slide again.
Tell you what, I will advance it to the next one.
slide. And I will tell you. Okay, this is good. So there are some impacts on the MPO's funding goals with the major infrastructure program definition changing. Staff recalculated the funding percentages for each investment program for projects that are currently programmed in the LRTP and the 21 to 25 TIP. I'm sorry, I messed up here. I got to go back. So I'm going to start over with this slide. So also included in the memorandum is a section that shows the impacts of changing the major infrastructure definition. Table 7 in the memorandum shows how the definitions and descriptions of the MPO's 6 existing investment programs changed with the new major infrastructure project definition. Most of the changes occurred in the Complete Streets program, since projects would no longer be classified based on whether they changed the capacity of the roadway network, but would be classified based on the roadway type. So for all other investment programs other than the Complete Streets program, the main criteria is if the project costs more than $50 million. So any intersection, bicycle, pedestrian, or transit modernization project that costs over $50 million is considered a major infrastructure project, although we probably won't have too many of these types of programs in those investment programs. We also included information in tables 2 through 6 showing each project's current investment program and the new investment program with the new definition. And again, most of the projects move from the major infrastructure program to the Complete Streets program. There are some outliers with an example shown in table 5 with bridge replacement projects. The MPO does not currently have a bridge program, although these projects could include complete street elements such as bike lanes, sidewalks, or dedicated bus lanes. And if the project has complete street elements, it could be evaluated as a complete street project. But if it does not have any of these elements in the design, the MPO may choose to establish a new bridge program in the next LRTP, or they could fund this project at its discretion, much like it did for the new Boston Street Bridge project in Woburn. Next slide. So there are some impacts on the MPO's funding goals with the major infrastructure program definition changing. Staff recalculated the funding percentages for each investment program for projects that are currently programmed in the LRTP and 21 to 25 TIP. So this table, which is also table 8 in the memo, shows the investment program in the first column with its LRTP funding goal in column 2. And then it shows the actual percentages of programmed projects in the TIP and LRTP in fiscal years 20 to 24 and then 25 to 29 using the current major investment infrastructure definition and then the newly adopted major infrastructure definition. So again, you can see that all the changes are in the Complete Street program with the major infrastructure program percentages decreasing and the Complete Streets program increasing. The new definition helps the MPO move closer to the funding goals established in Destination 2040 and is in line with the MPO's policy of continuing an operations and management approach to programming, giving priority to low-cost, non-major infrastructure projects. So this was, this is the end of my presentation for the actual definition. And as I said, the MPO did adopt the staff's recommended definition at the August 20th meeting. So I'm going to stop here before I get into the scoring and programming policies and then the the issues that the MPO are still discussing. So I'll turn it back to you, Len.
I'm sorry about that. So I was just saying that even though we do have the ability to mute and unmute ourselves, if you could raise your hand, that'll help keep some order to the process.
So these are so.
Matt, can you give people instructions on how to raise their hands?
Absolutely. You can click the participants button at the bottom of your screen, and a window will pop up that has the raise hand button, and you can click on that and raise your hand and allow Len to call on you.
And if they're on phone.
And if you, thank you. And if you are on the phone, you can dial *6. I'm sorry, *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself.
All right, so we have Mr. Montgomery. Unmute yourself. There you go. Thanks.
Hi, thanks. And I just had a sort of bureaucratic question, I think. Doesn't this sort of punt the question about the dollar threshold just down the road again in terms of, I mean, it reminds me of questions about cost of living increases. And is there any way to tie the 20 million of to the 50 to now and then have an automatic increase that builds in as opposed to waiting till the time when, once again, this is a hopelessly outdated number?
I think there was discussion, and I think the MPO, you know, we don't have to include it at all, but I think the MPO wanted to have this, you know, discussion and be able to say, do we really think that this $50 million complete street project is worth programming? So, you know, we looked at the numbers of how much, you know, projects are, and, you know, as I said, it used to be federal guidance that we had to include these, and then in this last plan there is none. But so we could have gotten rid of it, but the MPO still wanted to, you know, still say, you know, we want to look at these projects to figure out if they're really worth that much money. We don't have a cost benefit evaluation yet. I think we may down the road. So at that point, maybe we may revisit it. But you know, most of the complete street projects that we're getting now are, you know, under $40 million. So as you said, it may come up again, you know, as projects get more expensive, and they'll have to talk about it. But I think the main issue here is that the MPO wants to have that further discussion as part of the long range plan before it comes, you know, gets programmed in the tip.
Yes, and if I can add, David, I mean, I was one that actually initially did not want a threshold. I mean, I ended up going for voting for the to change the definitions that had the threshold, and it wasn't a major deal for me, but it was partly for that reason. But also, I could imagine that you would have really big project, I mean, that cost a lot, that really didn't, was like, let's say maybe a big long stretch of road that was a complete street project, and it would cost more than 50 million, and I would still like it to be categorized as complete streets. And essentially the reason it wasn't a reason to object is that the whole point is that we just have a number at which the MPO will say, hey, we need to stop and really think about this. And once we think about it, we can determine what category it's in. And it was actually that discretionary aspect of it, though, that was a problem for one person who I respect a lot, not wanting to go along with this definition. The other was that this person also felt that there shouldn't be a threshold. And the other was that, third reason was that he felt that the only types of projects that should be considered major infrastructure was those that required air quality analysis. And would this be the time to bring up that PDF that you provided that shows the change in projects? I mean, it was kind of along the lines of the table that you have up, but it's a different kind of table with color coding on it, or one.
Right.
Or do you want?
And I mean, that's okay at this point, because basically that was to answer the next question of what projects that we want to include in the LRTP.
Okay. we can
So,
wait then.
and that's fine if you want to bring it up now. It kind of helps.
We can wait.
If it helps in the discussion.
Well, there it is.
There it is. Yeah.
There it is. And
So that's the second piece, is to determine which ones we want to list in the plan. And then the ones that get listed in the plan are actually then going to be subject to the third issue, which is scoring and programming.
Right.
So what this is showing, and this was posted, it's really hard because it's small.
yeah, so I was just going to suggest to people, it is on our tax page on the website, on the agenda. You can just download it and blow it up as you need to.
Right. So it shows at the top the three categories of projects that we have to list in the LRTP based on federal guidance. But these are just projects that have to get listed, which is different than the definition of what the MPO is calling a major infrastructure. So just to kind of separate these two issues, the definition is used so that the MPO can program their projects and be subject to their funding goal of projects that are, we're not going to spend more than 30% of our regional target funds on the major infrastructure projects that are part of the definition that they just adopted. So that's one, you put that aside, and then now it's like, what projects do we have to list in the long range plan based on federal guidance? And then the MPO can add other projects that they may want to list, like maybe the projects that cost over 50 million, so that they can, have, further discussions on it. But the first three categories are projects that, I know it, but I gotta get my, projects that change the capacities network. So those are in the darker blue. And then the next are projects that change the capacity of the network and meet the new definition of the cost threshold, and that they're on, these other roadways. And then there was another, this one project, which is 495 and 90 interchange, which basically is a project that's funded by the Commonwealth, and it doesn't change the capacity of the network. It's an interchange, and interchanges are considered exempt from air quality if they're just reconfiguration of the interchange. But it has to be listed because it gets federal grant funding that we have to list it. It's a requirement by the feds. So that top section are those projects that we have to list based on federal guidance. Below, the red and the green are those projects that the MPO can decide that they want to add, and list in the plan based on our new major, our new definition. So category 4 are projects that do not change the capacity of the network, but they meet the new requirement, or the new definition. And then the green one actually was a project that was not, it doesn't change capacity. It was never included. It never really had to be included in the plan because it didn't change capacity, but because it's on an express or on an interstate, it would now come into the fold because it met the roadway classification. And then the 4 at the end are projects that were listed in the LRTP before. These are the complete street projects that we listed because they were over $20 million, and they no longer have to be included in the LRTP based on federal guidance and the new definition of the major infrastructure program. So the MPO, actually, you can see it's watermarked. This was discussed last Thursday. We put it together, after the meeting, and they asked us to send it to you. We'll send it to them, and this is what we're going to discuss at the October 1st MPO meeting as to what projects we actually want to list in the plan. And as I said, the top section, we would have to list it based on federal guidance, but do we want to list the other ones in the plan those that get listed in the plan will then be subject to the policies of scoring and programming that I'll get into next. So with that,
And how much time do you
probably have
anticipate?
questions.
Yeah, we have one more question maybe, and I just want to get a sense of how much more time you think you'll need for the next section.
It's probably like 10 minutes of
Okay,
talk.
great, no problem. So we have Chris Porter next.
Great, thanks. So, Ann, I think this is a good, it seems more intuitively correct, the way these projects are classified. So I think it's a good system. I'm just wondering, the blue projects that used to be major infrastructure, now they're complete streets. There's 3 of them. But they are listed also as changing network capacity. So I'm wondering how are they changing capacity? Because I'm thinking of complete streets, if anything, there might be a capacity reduction, but if it's a capacity increase, that sounds like you're, building, adding lanes or something like that, as opposed to a complete streets project. So I'm just kind of curious, with those projects, how the complete streets aligns with changing capacity.
Well, it's basically, as I said, it's a change in capacity, whether it's a reduction, like the Watertown project is a road diet. Rutherford Ave is a road diet. McGrath is a road diet. So it's changing the capacity of the network. So you said 3 projects.
Yeah, there's just, right. I mean, right. The top ones like the Highland Ave, 425, and then the Mount Auburn Street. But I see what you're saying. I mean, if it's right. So change doesn't mean it's increasing capacity, because if it's increasing, especially if like you're building something, then I think of it as more of major infrastructure, but as opposed to complete streets. But this is, so it could go either way.
Right, and like the Needham project actually is a widening of the bridge. It's a small section of it. It's mostly a complete street project, but they are widening the bridge as part of that, which would widen a section of it.
Okay.
So.
All right. Yeah, thanks.
And the last question for this section will be from Anna Christina.
I just had a really quick question as far as, do you guys ever get risk reports on any of these projects? I mean, not just time and cost overrun, but in general, do you see any of the risk assessments? Do you take that into consideration?
I'm not sure. I can't speak if Matt Genova gets them for the tip, but basically once it gets into the tip, that's when we start hearing about what's happening with the projects. Like I said, the first 5 years of the plan is the tip. And then we have, basically, we only have another time band, that's the 25 to 29 time band. So those projects are kind of not really designed yet. And then we didn't program anything in the last 10 years of the plan because we wanted to wait to see what projects were coming forward. But every year when they do the tip, we meet with Mass Highway and they tell us what the risks are, whether a project is going forward or not. And I know, we've done a lot of tip amendments this past year, which we then find out that costs are increasing, or there's right-of-way issues or that type of thing. So I don't know if we specifically get a risk assessment report, but we do find out what the status is of the projects as we move through the, development of the tip.
Great, thanks. And so we'll move forward.
Okay. So okay. So in the next slide. So I'll get into the staff's scoring and programming recommendations for the major infrastructure program. And as I said, these are still under discussion by the MPO, and this was part of the second part of the memo that we have this information. So staff felt that since the MPO is revising the tip scoring criteria based on the revised goals and objectives adopted as part of Destination 2440, it may be a good time to revisit the LRTP scoring process for major infrastructure projects. So for the tip, Along with the new TIP criteria, the criteria will be applied by investment program rather than how it was done before, and it was applied to all projects uniformly. So currently the MPO scores major infrastructure projects in the LRTP based on how well the project will address the MPO's goals, much like what is done now for the TIP. Projects in the LRTP's first 5-year time band generally coincide, as I said, with the 5 years of the TIP and can be expected to be constructed over that time frame. As expected, these projects will be further along in design and will have more information available for scoring the project as part of the TIP development process. So projects that are programmed in the later time bands of the LRTP may not have the detailed design, therefore the projects are scored based on available information about how they will advance the MPO's goals. So in almost all cases, once the project is listed in the LRTP in the later time bands, the project will automatically be programmed in the TIP when the project design is advanced and the project is ready for TIP programming. The project may be rescored as part of the TIP process using the more detailed design information, but in most cases, it is assumed that it will be programmed in the TIP regardless of its score. The project is not necessarily compared to other projects that are being considered for programming at that time. Next slide. So with this in mind, staff offered the following recommendations for discussion and consideration by the MPO board. First, staff recommended that all projects being considered for the LRTP continue to be evaluated on how well they address the MPO's goals established in the LRTP. Using the same LRTP criteria, each project will be assigned an LRTP score regardless of its design status. And any major infrastructure projects that have advanced to approximately 25% design will also get a TIP score using the TIP criteria. And this will provide a comparable set of scores for all LRTP projects, plus extra TIP scores for those that have advanced in their design. In addition, staff recommended that the MPO adopt a formal policy of rescoring all major infrastructure projects when they are ready for programming in the TIP, and it should not be assumed that the project will automatically be programmed. When the project is moved through the design process, more detailed information should be available, especially if it was a project that had been programmed in the outer time bands of the LRTP. At this point, the MPO can review whether it is appropriate to program the projects in the TIP because the costs may have increased since inclusion in the LRTP, and a second evaluation gives the MPO an opportunity to reevaluate the project in relation to a cost increase and the MPO's goals and objectives. When the project is ready for programming in the TIP, project proponents would have had the opportunity to address concerns received during the public input process for design. It can also be assumed that from this point forward, the design won't be altered too dramatically. And once the TIP scoring has been completed, the project can then be compared to other projects within the major infrastructure program and other investment programs. So the MPO can then review the funding goal policy as adopted in the LRTP to ensure that the projects in the TIP are addressing the MPO's goals and objectives. Next slide, please. And for programming projects in the LRTP, staff also recommended that the MPO adopt a policy that the status of all major infrastructure projects included in the previous LRTP will be reviewed during the development of the new LRTP to ensure that projects are moving forward in their design and approval process. If there's no movement in design or approval or a schedule for implementation is not available, the MPO should consider placing the project in the universe of projects for consideration in future LRTPs. And this will allow availability of major infrastructure program funding for projects that are currently being designed or those that require approvals from Federal Highway and Federal Transit. Next slide. So this was the information that, as I said, that we presented at the MPO meetings. And this slide, if you just click again, that shows the definition that was adopted for roadways at the August 20th meeting. And then the next shows the transit definition. And this definition allows the MPO to program projects in the major infrastructure program and apply its funding goal criteria of funding no more than 30% of its regional target funds to this program. So as I said before, this is purely so that we have a definition that we can use our funding goal criteria for. And then next slide, please. And then finally, these are the items that are still under consideration by the MPO. First, to identify the major infrastructure projects that should be listed in the LRTP. And this includes those projects that are required by federal regulation that must be listed. As I said, the blue, including projects that change the capacity of the network that are shown on the table in blue, and then projects that use federal transportation discretionary grant funds, which was included in category 3. In addition, the MPO can decide whether they want to list the projects that are not required to be included in the RTP, but are part of the new definition regarding projects that meet the $50 million cost threshold and projects that are located on roadways classified as interstates or principal arterials. And the scoring and programming policies that are under consideration will then be applied to the projects that are listed in the LRTP. And then I was going to go over the table, but we've already done that. So with that, we can actually keep that other slide up and open it up for discussion. Matt, if you want to go back one, just to let people know that these are the items that the MPO still is, it will be discussing at its October 1st MPO meeting.
So I have a quick question, Ann, before asking other people to ask questions. So that revisit MI project scoring, that's the LRTP scoring, right? Okay, great. And just so people know, that's in, I think, Appendix B of the LRTP. And it's a very different scoring, than we have for the TIP. And so, is there a threshold, and for a score that gets a project into the LRTP, or just needs to be scored?
I think basically it's whatever projects that we decide that we're going to list in the plan. So once they decide which projects are going to get listed, then we would apply the scoring, and we would score all of those projects. Using, as I said, because some of the projects don't have as much information as others. So there's a lot, if you look in Appendix B, it's a lot broader.
Right.
So every project would receive that LRTP score. And then if there is a TIP score, we could also include that for informational purposes.
Right. But in terms of getting that project into the RTP, I mean, that's just professional judgment that gets us there.
Well, it's basically, as I said, that's the second question. What are the projects that we want to list in the LRTP? Is it only those that need to be listed because of federal regulations? And I think that's, what one of the members wanted to be listed. They have to be listed. And then do we want to actually add these other projects, which is, brings up the issue that some members want to have that extra scrutiny of the higher cost projects. So if it's over 50 million, it would be part of our major infrastructure program that we would apply the funding goals to, but you also want to list these in the LRTP and then have them be scored and programmed in the LRTP before they're ready to be programmed.
Yeah.
If you don't put them in, then they can just directly go into the TIP. And then it would go through, the TIP development process.
So you're saying an MRI project can go directly into the TIP without going into the RTP?
The ones that are at the MPO's discretion.
Right. Although when I was reading the LRTP, it kind of indicated that an MRI project had to be in the RTP before it could go into the TIP. Am I wrong about whatever?
That's in the existing LRTP. That's the policy.
Right. Okay.
It has been the policy for the past, as long as I've been here. We've always listed all the major infrastructure projects in the plan before they get programmed in the TIP.
So then if we said it's at our discretion now, then we're not following the current policy. This is in preparation for the next LRTP.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we're not going to go back and change the current.
Gotcha.
We
Yeah,
want to get this done early.
Gotcha. I mean, so I'm sorry, I asked way more than one question, so I'm going to stop because I do have more and open it up to other people. We have Anna Christina.
I just had a quick question. I understood what you said about there are times when a project can be rescored. How many times can a project be considered for rescoring since there's no dynamic system currently in place?
Well, we would score it every time there's an LRTP, every 4 years. And then once it gets to the point where it's ready to go into the tip, so then it would go through the tip process and go through that tip scoring process. Right now, once a project gets included in the LRTP, in most cases, the MPO just assumes it's going to go into the tip. There are some projects that have been rescored as part of the tip, but I think most people feel like once it's in the LRTP, it's going right in the tip, no matter what score it gets under the tip scoring process. So what we're trying to set up here is that the basic policy is that every project's going to get scored with the LRTP process. If it does have a tip, if it's in the, if it's ready to be programmed in the tip and there is a score, we would provide that information as well. And then at that, once it does get into the tip, the MPO should make sure you rescore it and reconsider to make sure that it's still a good project. Because what if the project increased in cost? Or what if there was a lot of public input that we didn't know about when we programmed it in the plan that now is an issue? So we want to come back and re-look at the project, and then the MPO would reconsider whether it's still meeting the goals, whether it's meeting the funding policies or the funding goals. So that's the one issue. And then when we redo the plan every 4 years, let's look at the projects that are in the plan. Are they moving forward, or are they just sitting here? Or do we keep moving them, pushing them into another year? And if there really isn't anything design or any work being done on it, then potentially put it back in the universe. It will always remain in the universe, but it may not be ready to be included in the LRTP. So those are the major issues that we'll be discussing.
Thanks, Ann. John McQueen.
And as always, great job. You put in a lot of work. There was a chart that you showed that had the breakout in the categories of before and after the definitions.
Right.
Can you pull that back up?
Yeah, that was the table slide, Matt.
Sorry, within this presentation?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's probably 3 or 4.
Yeah, there we are.
No, I think it's the one before this.
No, it's this. No, it's this one.
Was it that one? It wasn't this one?
Yeah, no, it was this one. I'm looking at the goals with 2040 and the complete streets and versus major infrastructure balance. And it seems after the proposed definition that there's maybe a 20% gap or difference more in favor, I guess, of the major infrastructure after the proposed definition in the outer years. Current definition and in the proposed definition in those outer years. Is there any discussion to bring that ratio back in more into balance, I guess, with the original goals to get complete streets a little closer to the 45%?
Well, basically, there's in that second time frame, those are the projects that are programmed right now. So I'm trying to think. It's like McGrath Highway. McGrath Highway is kind of one of those projects that is a complete street, but it's like $80 million, and a portion of it is included on the roadway classification. I think it's principal arterial other. So, and the other is like the Framingham 126, 135 study. So there's only like a couple of projects, but they're big projects that are
Yeah,
included
I mean,
in that time frame.
those are both key kind of cross connecting, connecting various, like McGrath, is connecting the town again.
Right.
And that's a spaghetti bowl down in Framingham that just is crazy. So yeah, that will make things a lot better, safer, and more fluid. So.
You have more to say, John?
Nope.
Okay, fine, cool. Well, actually, that was kind of touching on something that I was thinking about too, and this may be me for another cycle down the road of LRTP and how we allocate our funds. Because I think what we're really getting at here, starting to get at a lot more, is how does the road function? Not so much how big is the road or how much does it cost but how does it function? And so something like McGrath, as you said, even though it's a big project, there's a big complete streets element to it. And if we were to look at how it may help cyclists, pedestrians, we might distribute the weightings for that project across functionality differently than we do by simply determining whether it's a major infrastructure or a complete street. So I think, for a lot of us, our goals are to make our roads safer for not only cars but pedestrians and cyclists, and the economic vitality, and sustainability, although I think that's actually, maybe that one's coming out, but playing it out on equity. So it's maybe another way we can think about how we categorize things for the distribution of dollars later on. But as I said, that might be something that I don't know if we can, if this is the right time to start having this discussion for the next cycle of the LRTP, or if we need to wait for the following cycle. But at least I wanted to put that out there as something that I'm thinking about, and can get some feedback from people like Ann and maybe Matt Genova as to whether it's too late to start that now, or yeah. So I'll stop on this point.
It's too late to start it for the last plan, but once we get through these definitions, that will definitely be a discussion for the next plan. And I think, if Matt, it's really something that we do as part of the LRTP.
Yeah.
So it would be part of the discussion. And the first thing is to get this major infrastructure definition, and then we know exactly what projects we're really considering. And then do we want to consider, maybe dividing, giving some of the percentage to complete streets, because it is McGrath is a complete street project. So potentially that's just that would be a discussion for the next plan.
Okay, so it's not too late for it. Great. So I do have another question, but I do want to open this up to other people, because we are getting close to time, and I could always call Ann and ask her my scoring questions later on. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. And so my issue about the scoring, the LRTP scoring, though, is that if it's in the LRTP and we're planning, and it seems like it's going to go ahead, unless there's like something major, like the citizens are in uproar about it, and their elected officials say no way. And I'm all in favor of scoring, and it helps to compare things, but what function does the scoring serve if it's going to move forward anyways once it's in the LRTP?
Well, that's the second policy, that it doesn't have to necessarily go forward. And that's where the second part was, where I said, you get to actually rescore it when it comes into the tip. And then you get to look at if there's a cost increase. You get to look if there's a lot of public input, because it may be a project that we included as part of the LRTP in the later time bands, and we didn't have this information. So it allows you to relook at the project once it's really starting to go through the design. The first 5 years of the plan is the tip. So basically, you're able to look at that point. But like The Framingham project, there's no design.
Right.
It's actually a project that's been there for a while. So we don't know what the design actually is. It hasn't actually gone through public input. It's the cost of it is the same cost that we've had for many years. So you want to relook at these projects.
I understand.
Make
Well,
sure
I guess
they're right.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, just because we're running low. I'm hopping in a little bit. I understand what you're getting at. But then, my big question is, what is the point then of the LRTP score?
Well, the point is we score all of the projects in the universe of projects. So there's a whole list of projects and only certain ones get picked to put into the plan.
And that's based on their scores?
Some of it, yeah.
Okay,
So,
all
I
right.
mean, if you look at Appendix B, I
Yeah.
forget how many there are. There's at least 25 projects
Yeah.
that were considered as part of the, and scored. And then you look at those scores and you know, obviously it's how much money do you have? You know, is it a project that, I mean, there's some projects that, you know, maybe the state should pay for, but you know, there's like 25 or so, at least projects. So you score them and then you can look at which of the ones that rise to the top.
Right. I think I'm just getting hung up on something, and I'll talk with you later. It's not a big deal. It isn't a big deal. So, but sometimes I just need to move past these things so that my brain, you know, can function a little better. So I'll take that up with you.
Right. You can give me a call.
I
Talk
will,
about it.
and it's not urgent. So the last question I think is going to go to Anna Christina.
I just had a quick question. Maybe you can't even answer it, and I think Len touched upon it. I did put it in the chat with you, Len, to see if you wanted to bring it up. But these definitions and goals, you said these are based on the current FAST Act, and that's changing.
No, the definition of what a fixed guideway system for transit is the definition that was in the FAST Act.
Okay.
The goals and objectives was developed by the MPO as part of the Destination 2040. And those goals and objectives are the basis for the scoring criteria for both the LRTP and the TIP.
Okay. No, that was it. Thank you.
So thank you, Anne. And in closing, folks, I just want to say that if you go back and look at our presentation about this, what they are recommending, what the staff is recommending to the board members, that's what we're going to be voting on. So I appreciate your input on that, and I will certainly weigh what you say in determining how I vote on our behalf. Once again, this is it's dense because it's complex. There are a lot of pieces that fit together. We're interfacing between the LRTP and the TIP, as we always do, but at a very nuanced, just a very detailed level. So if you're not getting it now, first off, I'll say sleep on it. You might find that you understand it a little bit better tomorrow. But then feel free to ask me questions, and I'm sure Anne is open to talking with folks. And so. We have until October 1st, and I'll take your feedback right up until it comes up on the agenda. So thanks again, Anne.
Thank you. And remember the memo. There's the memo that has a lot of the information in it too.
Yes. And it's a great memo. And 37 pages, but there's a lot of good information in it. So yeah. We'll move on, and maybe Matt can show me the agenda for today. Yeah, I think. Thanks. And so the next thing is the election committee update. And who's the chair of that?
That would be Franny.
Franny.
Hi. People on the nominating committee this year were me and David Montgomery and Anna Christina. Oh, I'm so apologizing. Anna Christina Fergoso, sorry. And we met with Matt Archer from the MPO staff. And Matt reached out to all the voting members, which there are about 23, individually to ask if they had any other ideas. But meanwhile, Len Diggins as chair and Scott Zedeckis as co-chair expressed interest in rerunning. And nobody, so he heard back from about 6 people that they'd gotten his email from Matt, and nobody else expressed interest in running. So we want to know from those of you who are on this call if there's anybody who wants to nominate somebody at this point, or if you want to offer yourself. And otherwise, we will put Len Diggins as chair and Scott as co-chair onto the October slate that will come to the October meeting, and we'll vote then. And I just wanted to note that the way we'll vote will be in some fair way that can include people, that they can have a private vote as they usually do in person, and that Matt is going to design based on what he hears from colleagues at the MPO and at CTPS, Central Transportation Planning Staff, and at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, in case there are people with simple, good methods. And either way, we're going to keep good records. So if anybody questions whether it was, a fair private vote, we have record of how we did it, because we're in a new territory right now with COVID. Anyway, so that's what we're going to do. And so I want to ask if there's anybody here who knows of anybody else who wants to run for these positions.
I think that like
I'm looking for hands.
Maybe 0.01 or 0.001. Depending on what your data looks like.
Well, you don't have to forever hold your peace if you're not raising hands. I mean, you can always feed back to Franny at some other point in time. What if someone wants
email? I'll put my information into the chat.
And when would be the deadline for them to get back to you, Franny?
I think. I think that David's wanting to say something, but I was going to say like in 2 weeks.
It sounds pretty good.
David, you want to say something?
Yeah. Well, according to our bylaws, the names stop. We stop taking names for consideration today at the end of this meeting.
Okay.
So,
if you want to.
So you have your chance right now in the next few minutes. If you're considering it, you better speak up quickly if you want to throw your name in the hat. You could remove your name, and I suppose if you throw it in now, but you don't put your name in right now. I think you got to wait a year.
All right. Well, hey, thanks, Mr. Montgomery. You know the rules. And so, Ms. Osborne, anything more?
No, that's it. So if we don't hear of any by the end of the meeting today, we'll put you, Len, and Scott on that, and we'll vote in October. And we're going to include, I checked the bylaws. I had thought that it would only be people who are at the meeting who vote, but apparently it's just all voting members can vote. So that's why in his method that he'll design, Matt will include ways that people can vote. It might be paper mail, so keep your eyes open, or it might be some electronic version. So
great, thanks. And I think there was some accommodation for folks who weren't at the meeting last year to vote. So, but I leave that in Matt's capable hands and yours, Randy. So, thank you.
If anybody here has any experience with voting, private voting, confidential voting during COVID, when we're stuck in these methods, then please talk to Matt.
Great.
Archer.
Thanks. Yes, we have an abundance of Matts here, don't we? So yes, Mr. Archer. So the chair's report, and so we spent a big chunk of the meeting dealing with the major infrastructure project. And as I said, I wanted to have that conversation with the group anyways, even though some other questions came up, which I've gotten a little bit more insight on. I'm still gonna have to have some more conversations, or at least another conversation with Ann. I mean, I am gonna vote for the staff's recommendations, unless I hear otherwise from the members. I just want to let you know that I'm leaning in that direction, but you can make a compelling argument, and and I'll change my mind. So I'm not locked in. And even if I were to feel strongly about something, if I knew that most of the members wanted to go the other way, then I would have to go the other way and just say that I don't agree, but this is where the way the members want to go. The other thing that was really great on the agenda was Matt Genova presented some scores comparing the new tip criteria or the new metrics that we're using for the new set of tip criteria versus the old. And it was really interesting, and there was one case where it might have been a bike pet project, I can't remember. The scores were about 7 points apart. They were both low scoring projects because of the nature of the current scoring system. And when they did the new scores, I think the projects were they had the same score, just one point across a difference. And there was another one where the scores were a lot higher. It might have been a major infrastructure or complete street projects. The scores did change but the rankings of the projects remained the same. And I asked Matt if he could take a look at a couple of projects, maybe 2 or 3 projects, where the scores were similar, and then rescore them and see if it kind of broke them apart in some meaningful way. I am not doing justice to the presentation and the nature of the way that the scoring process has been changed. I think it's great, but I really would like to get input from you all. And so even though when we had our executive committee meeting, I said there wouldn't, I didn't have any ideas for a bonus meeting anytime in the near future. And if we could have one in 2 weeks, maybe get Matt to just give us that run through on it, I think it'd be great. I think it'd really benefit everyone to see what we've come up with for the new criteria. We've been working on it for a long time. We've had lots of meetings on it, and I think that the MPO is going to vote on it in that meeting on the 1st. I think there's going to be another presentation on the 17th, and I think we're going to vote on it on the 1st. It really would give us a chance to make some additional input. And so I'd like to do it. I know this is short notice. Well, not that short a notice. I'm kind of springing it on you now. And what I would say is if you don't want to do it, it'll be an hour. If you don't want to do it, then let me know. And if we can't get it, it's like only a couple of you really want to do it, then we won't do it. But I would say if we can get like 7, 8 people that want to do it, we will. We don't need a quorum because we're not going to be voting on anything. It's just going to be for educational purposes. I haven't even asked Matt if he's available. I figured I would ask you all first to see if you want to do it. Okay. Matt is here, so if Matt Genova, is he still here? Yeah. So if you're not going to be available in 2 weeks, now let me know and we can just abort this conversation.
Okay. Okay. Bye, Adrian.
Matt's unmuted. If you're talking, Matt, we can't hear you. I'm not seeing your microphone moving, if you can't.
Doing a thumbs up, then.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not looking at I'm not looking at video. I'm just looking. So okay, great. Well, thanks, Matt. So can I get maybe some rough feedback from people now about how they feel about bonus meeting in 2 weeks? Be an hour starting 2:30, 3:30. Maybe hands up if you want to do it. Let's see one.
Actually, I was just gonna say whatever is easy for the group. It's good for me to just know in advance now.
Right.
That would be great. So whichever way you want to go, whatever's
Right.
easy for you.
Well, I'm not seeing any hands up for people who want to do it, so that's okay. All right. Well, I'm not upset or disappointed. All I'll say is maybe take a look at Matt's presentation on the MPO's website. I think it's a really good job. We're going to have a follow-up conversation at the MPO on the 17th. And if there's something critical. I mean, I'm a little constrained, I feel, as to what I can say to the group and still abide by open meeting laws. So that's why I'm not willing to be more conversive, I mean, with large numbers of people outside of the meetings. And if folks have a change of heart and you really want to do it, give me like a week's notice maybe to get in touch with Matt and see if he's available to do it. We will have to post this by open meeting laws, so I need to have like 2 days notice in order to do it. And as Anna said, she liked some lead time too. So, well, that's that.
Len,
Yeah.
this is totally different from the focus group, right?
Oh, yeah. This would be the results of all the focus groups. Oh no, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's very different from the focus group.
Okay.
The focus group is.
Make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's the steering committee things for. Yeah. Thanks for asking. They look different. Okay, fine. Let's have our last element to be the penultimate is the approval of the September and October meeting minutes, and maybe a discussion about future arrival of minutes. And if I can have, well, first off, is there any discussion, corrections, or anything that need to be made on the September and October?
I should clarify, and we can segue this into discussion, that only the September 11th, 2019 meeting minutes have been posted.
Okay. So, anything anyone wants to say about those minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm confused because I went to them a few minutes ago to quick look at them because I hadn't, and I find myself looking at the September 18th minutes.
Oh, and you know what? I apologize. That is a typo on the agenda. The September 11th meeting was canceled that month, and it was moved to the 18th. So I do apologize for that.
Okay. So, and so you're saying I hadn't gotten to the other one. So you're saying it's not there.
It is not.
Okay. So I move that we approve the September 18th, 2019 meeting minutes.
I second.
Right. Yeah. So, Anna, Christina, I should put a hand down. And how do you want to handle this, Matt? Do you just
honestly, whatever you would prefer.
Sure.
We have to do it by roll call.
Excuse me, Franny?
I think we have to do votes by roll call.
I was going to raise my hand on the chat, and that's how I.
That's a good way. Let's do that.
Okay. And so if you approve of them, just raise your hands.
So a quick reminder, folks, you can find the raise hand button by pressing the participants button at the bottom of your screen and then pressing raise hand.
And if you're on the phone.
And if you're on the phone, you can press *9. Thank you, Len.
Sure, no problem. Because I know Barry's on phone.
Boy, Matt, you could make a good like movie phone guy. You have a good.
Thank you. I'm honored. In all honesty.
Yeah, this is like election night. They're coming in. Hey, we got 6. Is that enough, Matt? Is that enough? Yeah.
That is enough for approval.
7. Yeah. John McQueen isn't coming in. He's like on the West Coast. We get his numbers late, or maybe it's like absentee ballot. It's like it's mail. It's lost in the mail. John McQueen, John Stewart. All right, folks. Well, we got enough.
Sorry about the noise.
What was that, Franny?
No, sorry about the noise. I just realized the trash truck was noisy.
That's okay. So that takes care of the September 18th minutes. So Matt, can you give us a little update on what's going on with minutes and what we can expect?
Sure, absolutely. So I recognize that there is a significant backlog. I've been spinning a lot of plates, and that's still no excuse for not having them done sooner. I will say that the plan going forward is, as Barbara alluded to at the beginning of the meeting, she is going to be assisting me with catching up with the backlog. So I suppose I could leave it there. What I will say is just that going forward, you will have more sets of meeting minutes for each meeting, and we are going to clear out the backlog as quickly as we can.
Appreciate it. And I take partial responsibility for it because I had when Matt had asked me if I wanted something a little more general, I'd said that I wanted something on the be comparable to what we've been getting and comparable to what the MPO gets. Because when there are times when I do go back and read those minutes, and sometimes it's a long time ago, and I'm not so much interested in what happened, but why it happened. And a lot of that is a discussion. And so I would like to see our minutes be at least on the same level as the MPOs. And so if that requires waiting a little while, then I was content to wait. But if membership felt differently about that, then I would abide by the wishes of the members. So that takes care of that. And so we have old business, new business. We have 10 minutes for that, but if we don't need it all, you'll get some time back. So hands up for that.
Nope.
All right. Well, seems like none. So we're gonna end early. And so folks, thanks a lot. And once again, you can get in touch with me if you have any questions about major infrastructure definition and policies. So take care, stay safe, and we'll see each other in a month or so. Bye-bye.